Man, it's so great to see you, and it's just so great to be with you. And um, you're so busy, and you are so accomplished. And as an artist, and as an actor, and as an activist, and um, I am just so pleased to spend this time with you. Again, we've been talking about political process, how one becomes a conscious person, and I think you are in a unique position because like a lot of us, you became politically aware at a very young age, became intensely politically involved in the Black Panther Party at a very young age, and now you're like we were saying before, one of the old heads. Now we're
Right.
the passing it on, not that old, not but you have a theater company, Project Impact, that's just extraordinary. You're around young people now, and you're teaching in the film department at Columbia University. And God, if they could see us, if they could see us back in B Block now in Leavenworth, where
Right,
this,
exactly.
I told you he was soft. That's what they say about me, right? It's like,
Right.
it's like, I told you he was soft. It's like, but no, why don't you, if you could talk about what you see emerging and how you relate that maybe to your own experience, this new consciousness that you see happening on the streets, and what that means to you.
It- you know, I th- I joined the Panthers when I was 15 years old, and it wasn't when I joined. It wasn't like I was political and I had studied a lot and that I made this decision that this was the most revolutionary organization at the time, and that's why I was going to become a member of the Black Panther Party. It was driven by passion. It was driven by confusion. When I say confusion, I was on like like many young black men trying to figure out what the path to manhood is. It was, and for us looking around on the street corners, even though I was, a good student and had a loving grandmother, Noonie, my adopted grandmother who was raising me, um, but worried her to death because I was one of these kids that would get good grades, but still
Mm,
hang out in the projects that were 5 blocks away
mm,
because that's what manhood looked like, having that swagger, getting in people's face. But at the same time, I was a member of the NAACP Youth Council
mm.
at my church and part of church activities. And then Dr. King was assassinated. And I got mad and felt that I had a personal relationship with Dr. King because of the work in the NAACP. We did, voters registration and we collected books and food and supplies for the Freedom Riders. Some of the Freedom Riders came up to visit us. For our audience, those were mainly students from the North, black and white, that spent a summer getting on those buses and riding into segregated bus stations in the South, knowing that when they got off the buses, people would throw rocks, eggs, beat them. In one case, the bus was set on fire, but they put their lives, not only sacrificed their summers or gave up their summers, they put their lives on the line to make change.
Mm.
Not dissimilar for what we saw with the Black Lives Matter protests, and people were amazed at how many white brothers and sisters was out there. I was pleased but not amazed because I
Mhm.
had seen what this kind of coalition, united front looks like. But Dr. King gets killed, and I get mad as hell, and uh, I get caught on the fringes of the rebellion on 125th Street and get pulled out of it to safety by some men who I just knew as militant black men at the time and sent home. And I go to school the next day and announce to my two best friends, we were hallway monitors, and those are people in the schools that you get out of class early and you stand in the hallway. Nobody listens to you, but you get to eat lunch early. You get out early.
There you go.
So so my two best friends was a black kid named Phil and a white kid named Paul Kirshner. And I come in the day after and I announced that Eddie Joseph, I hadn't even taken the name Jamal, was going to be a black militant.
Mm.
And I didn't even fully know what that word meant. Phil kind of nods his head, and Paul, my white buddy, looks at me and he says, Eddie, I don't know if you can announce that you're going to be a black militant like it's a career choice, like you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. I was like, no, Paul, you watch, right? So to prove to Paul even more so than myself, I had to now find a militant organization. And and I'm telling this because I'm trying to show you how subjective the process
Mm.
is,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It was like the black Muslims. And I
Mm.
was like, no, I don't like bow ties. You know, plus grandma, she makes those pancakes and bacon every Sunday. I love me some bacon. It was really that subjective.
Hmm.
A story came on about the Panthers where the Panthers stormed the state capitol of Sacramento with guns.
Right.
I'm riveted. And they come in, and the reason why the Panthers did it is because they were changing the gun control laws because of the Panthers. There was a time in California where you could carry, open carry a rifle or shotgun if you didn't have a record.
Hmm.
The Panthers carried rifles and shotguns and law books. And when the police would stop someone in the black community, they would be there and stand the legal distance away, 25 feet, whatever the statute said, read the person who was been stopped, read them their rights because the cops weren't going to do it, and then let the cops know we have a right to observe, we have a right to bear arms, and trust me,
Mm.
we have and will use the right to defend ourselves.
Mm.
And this caught the imagination of the black community, shocked the nation. No one had seen people stand up to police brutality and police terror in such a strategic and
Mm.
brave fashion. But this news report was sensational. And I'm like, they're crazy. They went to
Yes.
the white legislature. And then the reporter said, uh, the police pulled over the Black Panthers vehicles and they found more guns and communist literature in the trunk. And I went,
Mm.
they're crazy. They got black leather coats, they got guns, they're communists. I want to join. Because when you're 15,
Exactly.
crazy is good.
Well, I can remember the Life magazine. I think for a white person, I was certainly not politically conscious at 15, although 16, 17, it was Vietnam, and I was, in a position to have to start to choose, am I going to go to Vietnam? Am I going to be making that choice? I had already decided, conscientious objector, Canada, whatever, definitely not doing that. But I remember still blazed in my memory as the cover of Life magazine with the picture of the Black Panthers holding shotguns and the berets, the leather jackets, on the cover of this magazine. And I think that it scared white people to death, man. That was
Yeah,
just, it
it's
was,
man. So that was if
mm,
I was going to be a militant, I was going to be that one.
hmm.
And as we're riding on the subway to the Panther office, I'm with two older friends. Um, not much older, but when you're younger, you want to hang out with the older dudes.
Mm.
Now I don't really want anything to do with older dudes. I like to hang with the young people in my theater. I guess there comes a time somewhere, in your 30s or 40s or so that you're cool with people your age.
Mm.
One of my older friends says, when we get to he says, the Panthers are no joke. It's like the mafia. When you get in, there's no getting out. And I'm like, no getting out. My curfew is 10 o'clock tonight. The other person says, man, the Panthers, they're no joke. You're going to have to kill a white dude to prove yourself. And I'm like, kill somebody. I'm in the church choir. My other friend says, nah, man, you ain't got to kill a white dude. Sigh of relief. Then he says, you've got to kill a white cop. And you have to bring in his badge and his gun. So we go to the office. In hindsight, I think they were hoping that I punked out so they could say, we we were gonna go, but you were a punk.
Mm.
I wasn't gonna be a punk. When we get into the meeting, we're sitting in the back and I'm looking at all the older brothers and sisters, leather coats, fatigue jackets. Some of the sisters had their African head wraps on. But I'm 15, so yes, they were older, but the Panthers in the office that day were probably 18, 19,
mm,
21, 22.
mm,
Same as the freedom riders,
mhm,
same as the anti-war movement. It was young people, youth that were making the revolution. And the person running this meeting, which we call political education classes, was explaining the 10-point program. And if you read it, it talks about housing, it talks about jobs, it talks about um, healthcare, police brutality, nothing about hating white people or killing cops. But I jump up and I said, choose me, brother, on me. I'll kill a right dude right now. Whole meeting gets quiet. And he calls me up front
you're
and
too
he
young to
sits
be a
behind the
cop.
desk. Yeah,
Like,
right?
yeah,
He just, no, he's just, this kid is just stupid.
yeah.
And very dramatically reaches into this drawer in the desk. And I think he's going to hand me a gun, and he hands me a stack of books. And it was Malcolm X, it
Mm,
was Fanon. Everybody had the little quotations from Chairman Mao, so on
little
nice,
red book.
little red book. And I said, I thought this was a test, based on the bad information my boys had given me. I said, excuse me, brother, I thought you were going to arm me. And he said, young brother, I just did. And then as I'm walking to my seat, two key things happened. He stopped me. He said, young brother, since you came in here so mad at white folk, he said, if all of these cops that are in the community brutalizing, murdering, and arresting people were black, and the people being brutalized were white, if the people who own these stores in the community ripping off the community with high prices and spoiled vegetables, rotten meat, were black, and all of the customers and people being ripped off were white. He said, and these jive, lying, fascist politicians, if all of them were black and all of the oppressed people were white, would that make things correct? I thought for a second. I said, no, it seems like it would still be wrong. And he said, that's right, young brother. This is a class struggle for human rights, not just a race struggle for civil rights.
Mm,
Study those books.
mm,
And then before I get to my seat, there are posters, as you can imagine, all on the wall. And what Malcolm X and Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who were the founders of the Panther Party. But I got attracted to the poster of Che Guevara. Uh, and it was a quote that Che gave at the United Nations. And I'm looking at this brother with his beret and his fatigues. And the quote said,
at
at
the
the
risk
risk
of
that
seeming
that's
ridiculous,
ridiculous. That's right. Let
true
me say the revolution
revolutionary
are guided
by great
great
feelings
feelings of
of
love.
love. That's my quote too.
This blew my mind.
Oh,
This also made me go like, well, wait a minute. I'm in the Panther office and they're talking about love.
mm,
But my grandmother talked in the civil rights movement about love. Dr. King talked about love. And what you learn very quickly in the Panthers, and when I try to talk to young activists today, is that uh, principles can shift. Ideology could let you down because you get
no
a
kidding. Mm,
system, you have to adjust that.
mm,
But your love for the people will always give you the right guidance, the right purpose of what you're fighting for.
mm,
To make it clear that it's not about you, and it may not be about your ideology or your particular organization. You keep fighting to hold on to keep that particular collective together. And then over the years, you get into a battle with your collective and another
mm,
paper's collective, and who has the correct analysis. In the meantime, there are people in the community who are suffering from poverty, from hunger, from racism, from brutality, and they need our work. Not only our work, because we talk about not wanting white saviors, but we don't want to be black or brown saviors either. In terms of saying, I have the right ideology and I'm here to teach you and to liberate you. One of the most valuable lessons that I learned was from a Afeni Shakur, who tried to send me home that day. By the way, how old are you? After I was acting crazy.
oh, Fanny was there.
Fanny was there. And I put my, hey, I'm 15. When you're a kid, a year seems like a
Mm.
lot. I was like, I'm 16 and a
Yeah, yeah,
quarter.
yeah, yeah. I'm 16.
Yeah.
I'm 16.
She's like, you look like you're 13, 14 years old. Go home. And I was literally, she would chase me around the office. And I said, I want to be a Panther. She said, okay, I'm going to keep my eye on you. And she did, through my days in the party, through the Panther 21, uh, through a fainting for our audiences, Tupac Shakur's mother, until she passed. She was my big sister. This is what she taught me. She said the goal of the Panther Party is not to have every man, woman, and child in the black community become Panthers.
Mm.
It is to teach people the possibility of struggle, hopefully through our example. And if that happens, and if the people have consciousness,
Mm.
the people are participating in their own liberation, then we will make ourselves obsolete. That's the real job of an organizer, and the real job of a revolutionary is to make
Mm.
yourself obsolete.
I think
So,
that's a wrap. I'm not sure we need to really say anything. I think you've touched on all the major points here. I would feel like we would just be
right,
gilding the lily if we
right,
were to go
right.
on, man.
We
No,
would go on.
oh man, I think you are saying such important things,
But
such
then that's
important
teaching,
experiences.
that's for you and I, like,
Mhm.
discovering our artistic side in Leavenworth. Um, we look at it, we laugh about it, but not surprisingly, because we were there in the first place,
Mhm.
because we were willing to believe in something bigger than ourselves
Mhm.
and fight for something bigger than ourselves. And that wasn't for personal power or even for organization, because by that time, the mass, the above ground organizations were kind of in disarray. We
Yes,
were we were doing some underground stuff because we believed somehow we were going to continue to fight.
yes,
It was always about the people's humanity. And it
right.
was always about understanding the brilliance of our community, the brilliance of talking to each other, learning for each other. And art, in its purest form, does that. It elevates the human spirit, it communicates with
Absolutely.
spirit. So, what we did and what we learned as artists is it agitprop? Are we just saying,
Mm.
the people will rise, revolution,
Yeah, yes.
or are we doing stuff where people can see themselves in it? And then if you move a character, he, she, or they within your piece to some kind of consciousness, to some kind of awareness, and the audience can move with you,
Mhm.
um, whether it's film work or theater work or spoken word, then that's what you're doing. And it goes back to when you started to get politically educated. I came in that day a kid who was mad and thought that I hated white people because a white man had shot Dr. King. I left understanding that a white man may have pulled the trigger, but a system killed Dr. King. This is
Mhm.
a big jump.
Mhm.
I came in mad thinking that I had to hate a certain group of people. I left that day understanding that a real revolutionary tries to love all the people and tries to get people to see and fight together for their humanity. And so, in creating, then, as we get the craft of writing or directing or playing an instrument, we understood that good music, you know, uh, a good piece of poetry can have that same effect to awaken people. But you got to meet people where they're at. So I used to love, and I remember reading about this in the autobiography of Malcolm X. You know how Malcolm could debate a PhD in economics to a standstill, but also stand on the street corner and in street slang
Mm.
talk to
Break it
that
down.
hustler or that drug
Right.
drug
Break
dealer,
it
right?
down.
Do
Right.
exactly what we call
Right.
breaking
Right.
it down,
Right.
right? But with art, we still have to do that, right? We got to
Yes.
break it down. If we come in here, if we're landing here, like people already consciousness and poor you, if you don't understand, I don't think as revolutionary artists that
Mhm.
we're creating real transformation, but we can break it down so everybody can relate and come away. I have a poem that goes, there's a line in the poem that we may not have all of the answers. Well, the whole poem goes, the time has come for rifts and revelations, for way out trips to inner space. Now, if truth is one, if truth is really one, then it must be our perspectives that are fragmented. The journeys we make in search of unblemished realness reveals that much of the rest is a lie. And if love is to transform and to be transformed, then creativity must be the child of a most perfect union. We may not have all of the answers, but at least let's try to really understand some of the questions through truth filled endeavors that build large creative fires, or sometimes maybe just a flame. But nevertheless, let's keep trying.
Mm. Yeah. That was beautiful. That was beautiful, brother. The there's so much that I am reacting to in listening to what you said. I'm reminded of Archbishop Desmond Tutu when he talks in his speech about Ubuntu. I don't know if you've ever heard him give that speech about the the concept of Ubuntu in the Xhosa language, that I am a person for other people,
Yes,
that my humanity is inextricably bound with yours, that I have no definition in the abstract as a person, as a man, or as anything without you, that I cannot exist as a subject, as a human subject, without you. And the the notion that we can change anybody's consciousness or ideas, even I'm thinking about right now, here we are, we acknowledge that this is like election night in the United States, when we're watching this like white supremacy, like surfacing full flower. How does my job, I feel, is how am I going to help to transform this country in some way? How do I reach some of those folks, some of my own family in Western Pennsylvania and Ohio? How do I, it doesn't start from up here, it has to start from that acknowledgement of that shared humanity. As hard as that is, because it's easy to be completely convulsed with revulsion, for everything they think. Their in fact, their worldview often is not as to deny our own humanity and of the people I love. So how do you do that? Well, that's where it gets really difficult. That's the real work. That's the real work. That's it. It's not different. It's not some other work. It's not some other job. It's not like, and I know from having stood on a lot of street corners trying to break it down for white folks, that intellectual rap does not do it. It doesn't, it is never, in my experience, I have never been able to argue somebody intellectually out of a white supremacist position. But I know you and I both know, in fact, somebody we're going to be talking to in this panel tomorrow. I think a lot about Jihad Abdul Mumit, who I watched twice in the penitentiary. I'm sure you know the film American History X. You know that story with Edward Norton about how he becomes transformed from a white supremacist, like a Nazi, an ideological, committed Nazi, and just the daily work of working side by side in a laundry with this young brother was what it took to transform him into a person, into a human being. It was like no big aha moment. No, there was no, he didn't go to some kind of like re-education camp or some kind of like, you know, some kind of like class or therapy or something like that. It was just every day folding laundry next to somebody who he had to ultimately recognize was just like you. And I watched Jihad be
and by
able
the
to,
way, if we can name that brother Willie Post, who became Subi and
yes, yes,
Iwakun,
who became
who
Subi.
I love to this day, who got
Oh,
killed in a bank robbery,
what a
who was
tragedy.
the cat man of Leavenworth, who took
Yes,
care of
yes,
cats
yes.
and kittens, and who was a damn good actor. He joined our theater company.
Is that
Subi
right?
was a good actor. Subi
Oh, I
Saifuddin.
love that brother like I
Love
can't.
that
I
white
wrote a
brother.
poem about him as well. In
Yeah.
fact, I was planning on reading it for the stream tomorrow morning. That I watched. Subi was one of those people that was reached just by, and this is maybe some of the thing about prison, which is just an interesting thing. I think for white people, other than the military, prison is the one place where in our society white people are in day-to-day contact with black people or with people of color in a way in which your daily lives are shared down to the most mundane level. Now of course, people do everything they can in the penitentiary. We certainly saw it, going to the mess hall, and you got the black section, and then you got the white section, and then there's the Latino section, and then there was where we all sat was like the international section with like the the political prisoners, the the renegades, the people who were ostracized or chose to make a statement by saying I'm not of any of this. I'm a human being. This is where I choose to sit. And that in and of itself was a political statement in any of the penitentiaries I was ever in. But that I have to say, I came into the penitentiary and came into prison as I thought of myself, oh, I'm really conscious. I'm a conscious brother. I'm like I'm down with the struggle. I'm doing like I'm getting my ass beat. I'm getting, I'm getting my, I'm paying like dues like you would think, most white people don't, think about ever paying, but still the process of being in prison for me changed me so much for the better. I mean, I became so much a better person. I'm not going to thank the Bureau of Prisons. That's not, that's not going to like, well, thank you for, wasn't the, that it was in spite of it, but
Right, right.
it was you learn the big secret that everybody's just like you. They want the same things. It's like the lessons are so simple. It's just so simple. And there's a very few people who are really despicable. And they're white and black. It doesn't matter. That is not a racial thing at all. There are people that are really despicable people. But the vast majority of folks we were around were just faced with a whole bunch of bad choices, and they happened to pick one of a whole myriad of terrible choices that they had in front of them, and there they were. But for a white person in the penitentiary, if you're open to it, you're finally, extricated from apartheid. You're finally now you're living in a society of people, of human beings, of that connection. And the arts for me in prison helped me in that journey. We have I think you were on the street by then, but I was at Lewisburg. um I had a rock band. So I was playing I had this prison band. The name of it was Uzi and the Fish Sticks. And my band consisted of a Chinese Hell's Angel who was 6'5", Steve Yee, who played the guitar like a god. um a Cuban brother from Miami who Flex, and Alberto Rodriguez, a Puerto Rican prisoner of war, POW, political prisoner, and this a gangbanger, this brother named Uzi, who was Uzi of Uzi and the Fish Sticks from the West Coast, from Seattle, who loved rock music, played the drums and sang, and then our drummer was this young white boy who died of AIDS in the hospital. I sat next to him and held his hand while he expired from AIDS, and he was just a Georgian, guy from Georgia, bank robber, coke addict, just broken soul, but a wonderful, wonderful kid, wonderful drummer. And it was we wanted to make music. We didn't give a fuck, we didn't care. Like, it was like even Steve, who was like, it's like Hell's Angels, it's just like,
Right.
you got a position there, but we all just took care of each other. We carried each other's weight. We just took care of each other, and everybody became better through that experience of trying to make something happen artistically in the prison. It was just a beautiful experience. It was created for me peak experiences. I can say that several experiences I had as a musician in prison I have never been surpassed on the street in terms of the moment, that magic of performing, of connection, of being in that place, probably very well as an actor or as an artist, when you are making something that's unforgettable for everybody that's involved. And I know it saved me. It saved my life. I mean, it saved me as a soul. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought we had lost. By the time I got to Leavenworth, I thought we
mm,
uh, we had lost the revolution.
Yeah.
A couple of years earlier, a group of young revolutionaries were at Columbia University. The students had shut something down and invited us to campus to give speeches. So, and we wound up in someone's dorm room or a couple of adjacent dorm rooms with, a big pot of spaghetti and some weed. And uh, so you have, SDS kids and Panthers and Young Lords. And there was a group of Asian brothers and sisters called Iwakun, stood for the Harmonious Fist. And we get into this serious debate about how long the revolution would take. And we were serious. 1 year, 2 years. Someone said 5 years. They were called a
Oh, what a
reactionary.
pessimist! What a
Yeah,
pessimist!
you know,
You're a sellout.
finally,
5 years.
finally, when the food was gone, the weed was gone, about 3 in the morning, people were just collapsing. We said, since we're in the heart, belly of the beast, in the military industrial complex, okay, it's going to take 10 years, but no more.
Mm,
And that was us. We decided it right there and then
mm,
how long it was going to take. So imagine how we all felt when not only when we hit that 10-year mark, or even the 5 year mark, that not only had we not won, but that we had been decimated,
mm,
and especially by something called the counterintelligence program,
mhm,
COINTELPRO.
mhm,
And so I came in thinking we had lost, and literally the arts starting to do the play. And originally it was Jihad, same brother,
mhm,
kind of passed me the torch. He knew I did a little bit of theater on the outside with, Black Guerrilla Theater it was called, and said, I know you write it a little bit and you acted a little bit. And I created a piece that I thought was for Black History Month. And then a couple of Mexican brothers crashed the rehearsal. And we thought they had a beef with somebody. And they came in and they sit down, they're looking at the rehearsal. So the one thing you don't do, because if let's be clear, like MA was no joke. And
mm,
usually when they showed up, it was to
mm,
take somebody out. Came
mhm.
strapped for war, and that was the beef. But nobody was going to look. Everybody was doing like the side glance, like who's the beef with? And then after about 10 minutes, man, one of the brothers, Tito, points at me and he was like, yo, Esther, let me talk to you a minute. I'm like, oh shit, it's me. What did I do? You know what I mean? I don't gamble. I don't get high. You know what I mean?
I
What could
do.
my beef be? Because usually that's the stuff to get you in trouble, right? You got a
Yes.
drug beef or get.
Yes.
Brother pulls me to the side, man, and as serious as he could be, he was like, Essay, you know, I came to your spot, man, to check it out, man, because there's rumors about this shit, Essay. And I've been checking you out for about 10 minutes, and I want you to listen to me real good. That guy you're working with over there, that fucking guy, yo, Holmes, he's not feeling his character.
Oh no. No, 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 no. Tell me you're
That's a
making
true
that up.
story. I said,
That's a
man, get
scene from a
in.
film. That
You
no,
get,
no, come on, man.
and the brother's good. And he makes his man get good. And
Uh,
then that's when some of the white brothers started showing up. I'm straight up.
oh man,
That's
that's
how we
gotta be in the
wound up
movie.
having
That
this
has to be in the
multicultural
movie, bro.
cast, man. And then we were able to have our own little section where they go like, well, them is the acting dudes. They crazy, but the last play was okay, so we're gonna give them a pass.
No
But it's
kidding.
again this thing discovering the humanity. But I, I want to talk about what the government fears the most about this, right? Dr. King, let me put it in context. Dr. King uh, led the movement, and it was about voting rights, and it was about desegregation, it was about integration. He gives one of the, you know, one of the greatest speeches in history, the I Have a Dream speech. But I think an equally great speech is the one that he gave in 1967, almost a year before he would be killed, at Riverside Church in New York, where
About
he
Vietnam.
critiques the three evils of America. And those three evils are poverty, racism, and war, or as Dr. King said, militarism.
Militarism.
And he starts talking about the struggle against poverty, all poor people, not just black poor people, and linking that up and linking arms
Mhm.
with people who were protesting the war, poor folks everywhere, and civil rights. Class struggle.
Mhm.
He starts to denounce the war in Vietnam,
Mhm.
not just as a war that's morally wrong, but a war of capitalist exploitation.
Mhm.
People got so mad at Dr. King.
Mhm.
Stay in your lane. Deal with the segregation. I'm talking about black supporters, white
Mhm.
supporters.
Mhm.
And he was dead within a year.
Mhm.
Malcolm X said the white man is the
Same thing.
devil,
Yes.
straight
Same
up.
thing. Yes. Yes.
Malcolm leaves the Nation of Islam and he comes from, he makes Hajj. He goes to
That's
Mecca and
much.
he makes his pilgrimage. And he says, I no longer believe that. I have made the pilgrimage with Muslims who were white, with Muslims who were Chinese. But Malcolm goes further. Malcolm, in a speech at Oxford University, begins to critique capitalism. And he begins to talk about the possibility of armed struggle. And he's dead within seven
Within,
months.
yes.
The Panthers say all power to the people. And we say that means black power for black people. That means white power for white people, brown power for brown people, red power for yellow power for yellow people, red power for red people, if I haven't said that. And we would say X power as Fred Hampton to everyone else. And we start talking about a class struggle. We're talking about white people who are as poor or poorer than black folks, more white people then and now on welfare than black folks. Fred Hampton creates a rainbow coalition.
The original.
The original Rainbow Coalition, there's this great thing. If our audience just Googles Bob Lee and the Panthers, who was Fred's protege, and sometimes if you just Google Bob Lee, it'll come up. Sometimes if you Google Panthers and Hillbillies, and Panthers are talking to a group of working class, poor white folks.
Mm.
You think they're in Appalachia someplace, but they're on the west side of Chicago.
Chicago, right, right.
You look at these people and you would go, those are, if you turn the sound off, you would go, those are Trump supporters.
Yes.
And Bob Lee is talking about housing and economics and police brutality. And there's this great thing with this old white guy in a lumberjack shirt with some teeth missing says, I don't know about y'all, but I'm with these here Black Panthers. If you look a little bit further, there's this great thing where there's this uh, 13, 14-year-old white kid talk about throwing a Molotov cocktail at the cops because of how the cops beat him. And Bob Lee is saying, no, we don't want you to get killed by the police. That's not the way we're going to you do it. And this is why Fred Hampton was killed. The Young Lords go under the friendship because of the friendship that Fred Hampton had with Cha Cha Jimenez and the Young Lords go from being the biggest street gang, Latino street gang, to a revolutionary organization.
Mm-hmm.
Rainbow Coalition with rising up angry working class whites, the Young Lords, and the Panthers. And gang members start getting politicized. And when they looked at what Fred was doing across all of those fronts with the gangs, with the working class and poor white folks, Latinos, they said if Fred Hampton continues to organize, we have 25,000 Chicago police. We estimate there's about 100,000 gang members. And this is not counting the white poor and the Latino poor and everybody he's organizing. The city will be lost. And this is why Fred Hampton was murdered in his sleep. And so when you really start talking about it, it's what they fear the most. When J. Edgar Hoover testified in front of the Federal Bureau of Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he testifies before Congress on something that they had at that time called the House on Un-American Activities. And this is when he calls the Panthers the greatest threat to the internal security of America. What he hated most and what he talked about the most was not Marxism, was not the guns. He talked about the free breakfast program for children and how destructive that was. And it goes back to what we're saying around organizing folks around their needs.
Mm.
And that's how, look, freedom, justice, liberation, great ideals. We could talk about it in a socialist context, in a humanitarian context. But freedom is somebody whose stomach is growling as a meal. Liberation to someone who is homeless is a safe, warm
Mm.
place to sleep,
Right.
right? And so, and justice to someone who is sick is compassionate medical care. And so when you start doing that kind of work that the Panthers, and by the way, the Lords and these other groups were doing together, all of the stuff that we did with coalitions. It was very important for us to have the community and other organizations. So the work that the Panthers did in the hospitals in New York, when they would take over Lincoln Hospital, when they started opening the clinics and progressive young doctors and nurses would treat people for free and then come into the community either to a church or to a Panther office or a young office to do sidewalk clinics, um, changed the way people looked at healthcare. The breakfast program made people know what the Panthers did with no grant money. We said, people talk about kids, black kids are disruptive. Maybe if a kid is in first grade and a teacher is doing the arithmetic lesson and she says 3 apples plus 2 apples equal 5 apples, and the kid's stomach is growling because they haven't had breakfast and probably an insufficient dinner, yes, it's hard to pay attention.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we would find community centers and churches that would donate space. We would go to stores in the community and get donations of food. You'd put up a flyer, and the first week you'd feed 10 kids. By the end of the month, guaranteed it would be 100 kids. And at the height of the breakfast program, people estimate that the Panthers were feeding every morning 50,000 kids. But it became a model for other progressive organizations to say, we want a breakfast program or we're doing a breakfast program. And they would name it, the breakfast program for their community center or for their organization. And we were fine with that. It wasn't the idea that it was the Black Panther breakfast program. Everything that we did had the name Peoples in front of it.
Mm.
It was the People's Breakfast Program. It was the People's Health Clinic. And when other communities began to do it, that idea that we can do things in a socialist way,
Hmm.
in a way that that we can uh, make it happen from each and every person according to their ability
Mm.
and give back to everyone from each and every person according to their needs. It's still the idea that they fear the most. So when people talk about socialism and the terrorism
Mm.
that we see that the right is doing now, these become buzzwords to make them think we don't want that in our communities. But as
Right.
you said, if we can just talk to folks through the arts and one-on-one, you know, and in that laundry room, or maybe you're on the job and you're window washing next to someone, or you're mechanic next to someone, and you can have this conversation and go like, what are you really mad about?
Right.
Okay,
Right. Right.
forget the color, forget my gender,
Right.
forget
Right.
my sexual choice, forget that I prefer the pronoun they to she or he. What are
Mm.
you really mad about? The bottom line is that they're mad about hunger, and they're mad about uh, the lack of justice. They're mad about housing. They're mad about those things. And you can say, guess what? I'm absolutely mad about the same things. And can we organize around that? The system has always been good of dividing people, making think that he's the color because he's white, she's the color because she's brown, they're the color because they're black. It's always been divide and conquer, because that way people don't go, wait, the real reason, if we're all hungry, why are we all really hungry?
Mm.
And then you start to look at the system and the class structure. So this is what we learned, and this is what we learned about organizing folks around their need. uh, and this is the work I think that artists and organizers and teachers have to do. And it is more practice and it is a lot less theory and more practice.
Mhm.
I talk to my son a lot, who's in the DSA, and young people, and said, y'all are trying to organize around ideas. We have
Mhm.
got to organize folks around their need.
Mhm.
And no matter who wins tonight, we have work to do.
We got the same work to do.
We got the
Absolutely.
same
The
work to do.
same,
Doesn't
same,
matter who
same damn
wins.
work. Does it make any difference who's there? We got the same work to do.
That's right.
I completely agree. I'm not stressed about this as many of many of my liberal friends are, who are like
Yeah.
living and dying with the election returns. But um, it's not to say one choice might not be better than the other, but the structural issues are exactly the same. And in fact, one could make an argument that the the more neoliberal tact has really just obscured structures that have needed to be overturned for 50 years. And
That's right. And what
that's
the left does in progressive people is that we tend to dig into our position and we isolate in a different way,
right.
right? We're more rainbow on our side of the fence or our
Mhm.
side of the moat. We are more rainbow in that way, but we are just as dug in and hateful to anyone that doesn't agree with us.
Yes, yes.
You see?
Yeah.
And that's the work that we have to do, the healing work. And that's what you talked about earlier. That's the hard work.
That's a
That's the
hard
hard
work.
work
That's
to
a
come
hard one,
across that
man.
side of the moat,
Yeah.
knowing that somebody's going to call your name, spit in your face, and slap you down, if not pull a gun on you.
That is the hard work. And it's that side of the equation is armed to the teeth too. You know,
They're armed to the teeth.
they are armed to the teeth and they're ready to pull that trigger. And that makes it even more hard. That makes it even more difficult. They say that the white left is the only group of people that doesn't have guns in the United States. It's like it's the only
Right.
unarmed group in the whole country.
Right. Right on. Man.
But um, just I think maybe we can talk about some of this more in our panel discussion about the Black Lives Matter demonstrations and the focus on the police. But that is, I'm wondering what kind of discussions you've been having with your young people in your theater group and Project Impact
So
around
Ubuntu
this.
that you talked about so beautifully earlier is actually one of our principles. And we try to uh, get people to leave or to live with the idea to live with the idea that I am because you are,
Mm, mm,
and that if we all aren't free, none of us are free.
mhm.
That if one person is hungry, we're all hungry, right? So we really try to do a lot of that compassion work. I've tried to not make it ideological. I didn't want people to just say that's
Mhm.
kind of like a baby Panther Party in terms of what it
Yes,
is,
yes.
and to use theater uh, there are three great things that one can learn from theater besides your lines in the text in the history of theater, and that's to think creatively, to think community, and to think critically.
Mm,
Right? We
mm,
want you to be creative in that way. Even if you're doing a piece that's written by someone else, what do you bring to it as an actor? Although we do a lot of writing, the
mhm,
young people create their own work. You have to think and live community because rehearsal starts at a certain time. We want to support each other.
mhm,
And we do a lot of performances that are uh, integrated music and spoken word,
mhm,
and kids know how to support each other.
mhm.
Um, Everyone gets a turn singing, dancing, doing whatever. And it's great to be at an impact rehearsal because a young person will stand up and sing a song and sing, do a little solo part and kill it. And the kids will applaud. And then somebody else will get up and forget a couple of lines and go off key. And the kids will cheer
Still, no, that's
because
great.
it's that idea of safe space.
Right,
And
right,
then
right.
and then we do a lot of work about thinking critically.
Mhm,
That's why we want them to write the pieces, right?
mhm,
Why are things a certain way? How did they get this way? And how can it be changed?
mhm,
And so we have something within the organization called SOS, and it stands for Safe Space, Outstanding Effort, and Service to our family, friends, and community. And the great thing for us is when young people come back and we say, listen, you're an actor because you love acting. You're a singer because you love singing. You're a poet because you love poetry, not because you have a record deal or not because you've been on television or you have X number of followers on Instagram, but because you love it and you will always be that. So do it because you love it, and then what's supposed to follow will follow. So most of our young people, so the two things we really push in that, if we're guilty of brainwashing, it's these two things. You're going to college and you will give service, whatever that
mm,
looks like for you.
mm.
Some of them come back and give service through impact. And a lot of kids can't come back to New York because they can't afford it.
Yes.
We would love them to come back and change Harlem and change the Bronx, but they'll come back and say, I can't afford to live here and I'm not moving back in the projects with grandma. but we have
Mhm.
young people who are in Atlanta, who are in the Midwest, um, who are, up, in the northern part of the country, who are doing amazing work as teachers and as educators. And they'll come back and they say, I've, I've taught safe space,
Mm.
or I've taught the idea of
Cool.
artivism when you
Very
combine
cool.
an artist and an activist. And
Right.
that's if we're sending leaders into the world and people who are
Mm.
thinking critically, this is what's going to change the world.
Mm. Well, that is a great place to pause this. This is a conversation that, as far as I'm concerned, could go on for days. And I look forward to having those conversations, as a matter of fact. But I think this is a great place to close for now. And we'll resume tomorrow, actually, in a couple of hours, a couple of short hours.
A couple of short hours.
But I'm so grateful for everything that you've shared here today, and I'm so blessed to know you and to have you as a friend, and how much I've learned from you over the years. And it's thank you so much, Jamal.
Thank you, brother. I love you. I'm in awe of your consistency in spirit, your loving spirit, your strength, your courage, um, and in always finding a way to give back as an educator, as an artist, and as an organizer. So it's been a blessing to be your friend and your brother, brother. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Peace, brother.
Peace.